So we've had a lot of people in our community who are seeing others at dine-in restaurants, and that's made them a little frustrated. Is dine-in at a restaurant okay, given what we're seeing with COVID-19 and how it's spread?
Well, I would say that eating at a dine-in restaurant right now is inconsistent with the CDC guidelines for limiting the spread of COVID-19. Although you can take some measures, for example, like separating tables, the reality is you're still interacting with a hostess, you're interacting with a waiter or waitress, and some people are better about observing kind of a 6 foot limit than others. I know I have personally, I'm fairly militant about it, but others are not so good. And if you're in a public space and someone comes up, what do you do? Do you run away as people are, loitering in a restaurant and things like that? I think it's potentially problematic.
So how is that enforced though, right? Because it's not like the CDC has power to say you must not dine in at a restaurant. Is it just up to the individual to follow that? Is it up to the corporation to make those rules? Is it up to local governments to set those rules? How do we enforce that given it's not a law?
Yeah, it is up to the local governments to enforce that. And again, this is uncharted territory for everyone. And exactly how you balance personal freedom and also not giving people the idea that they have to sit inside of a single room in their home with a message of not taking risk like that is a difficult one. And I applaud the local leaders for trying to balance that. However, there's not a ban on using good judgment. And the general public should take it upon themselves to say, this is an unreasonable risk. Applebee's has takeout service. There are plenty of others that have takeout service, and that is a much lower risk. And certainly, cooking at home is also a much lower risk, and eating at home is a much lower risk than eating out in
Um, I'm trying to think. So, moving forward in terms of mitigating the spread of this virus, people do still have to eat. And there has been some kind of defending dine-in restaurants saying, well, how is that any different than me going to the grocery store and giving the teller my change, or going to Lowe's and Home Depot and giving the teller my change? Could you talk about that? Is there a difference with dine-in restaurants to grocery store and other stores we're going to?
I would say there is a difference, and obviously everyone does have to eat, and there are risks to going to the grocery store. I would argue that those risks are a little bit easier controlled in that setting, but again, risk as well. How close are you to the person in the line in front of you? Um, Hopefully, though, in a grocery store setting, you're going in, you're getting your stuff, you're leaving. As opposed to in a sit down restaurant, tends to be more prolonged contact. But I agree, you can mitigate those risks by separating the tables, by being careful, by washing your hands, by using hand sanitizer, etc. The utensils, the everything that you touch in terms of the glass and everything else also does have the potential of transmitting the disease and probably represents a slightly increased risk over something like going to the grocery store. But again, the idea that people don't have to eat and that going to the grocery store also doesn't have some risk associated with it, albeit small. Again, there's truth to that.
So I am a restaurant owner. It's tough for managers of restaurants who are, under a corporation because they've got to do what the corporate says. But if I'm a restaurant owner and I don't have to close my dining room, but I'm given that tough decision, right? Of do I? I'm not being forced to, but should I? Is it the responsible health decision? What kind of advice would you give that local restaurant owner? How should they act?
Well, again, this is the same thing that local leaders have struggled with as to how to give guidance and how to allow a little bit of latitude. For example, if a restaurant were to focus on curbside delivery or to focus on a takeout service, that would dramatically reduce the risk. For those, for example, that may choose to stay open, certainly you don't want a crowded waiting room. You don't want tables that are jam packed on top of each other. You want staff that are being proactive about using hand sanitizer, maybe even, for example, taking your order from a further distance away. And again, this is all uncharted territory, and so how we manage these risks and how we communicate that is challenging, regardless of which approach you take.
I know you've already talked on this, but I think my last question is to the individual. You know, these businesses are getting a lot of criticism, and the individuals are as well. Could you talk a little bit more that, you know, just because a restaurant is open and just because their dining room is open, individuals, we still have the power to make decisions, and what decisions should we make to protect ourselves, our families, and the community at large?
Yeah, as I said before, there is not a ban on using good judgment and good common sense. And particularly those high risk individuals should avoid that at all cost. It is unfortunate if others choose to put themselves at risk that they may not realize that they are also putting others at risk. But for those high risk individuals, they should absolutely avoid going into situations like that.
Perfect. Dr. Coule, that's all I needed. Thank you so much for being available, even on short notice for us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Bye, Dr. Coule.
Bye bye.